Good evening and welcome to the Guilderland Central School District's Board of Education meeting. Tonight is March 11th. Can everyone please silence their cell phones and stand for the pledge? We will look at that flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll begin with public comment. Let's start with our in-person public comment from Ms. Steigar.
Can I just begin, or do you need
I have to read the warning. I'm sorry,
Okay.
real quick.
No,
Sorry
it's
about
fine.
that. The Board of Education encourages public participation at its meetings and recognizes its responsibility to hear public comment. An acknowledgement of the public comment, either orally or in writing, will be provided as appropriate after the meeting. As a matter of practice, the Board of Education does not engage in dialogue during the public comment period. There will be 2 opportunities at each regular board meeting for public comments to be heard. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes, please. Although the Board of Education welcomes comments about programs offered by the district and other aspects of the district's operation, the board expressly prohibits public comment that would infringe on a particular person's or student's privacy rights, would be disruptive of the board meeting, or create some safety issue. Persons who desire to speak to the board about specific issues relating to employees or other confidential matters should request an executive session in a letter to the board president briefly outlining the issue to be discussed.
Okay, thanks. I'm here tonight to advocate for my children's education and to speak on behalf of many third grade families at AES, some of whom have already reached out to you by email, including myself. We are frustrated that the district has proposed cutting next year's 4th grade class section at Altamont from 3 to 2, which increases the class to 24 kids. AES serves students who already face significant obstacles to academic success, being a Title I school. Maintaining 3 sections is crucial to ensuring that all of next year's 4th graders receive the attention and challenge they deserve. Small class sizes benefit all students, and the research proves this. Students who require extra support to reach grade level receive the direct attention necessary for progress, while higher achieving students who often risk being overlooked get the check-ins and challenges they need to stay engaged. In larger classes, such as those with 24 students, it becomes nearly impossible to effectively meet the diverse needs of all students, especially in today's classrooms where more students with significant learning and behavioral challenges are being mainstreamed. At its core, school exists to provide students with the best possible learning environment. When budget cuts are necessary, they should not come at the expense of class size. A budget is a statement of values. You invest in what you believe in. Yet the proposed reductions do not align with the values of this community. Last year's budget priority survey made it overwhelmingly clear the number 1 priority for parents, teachers, students, and community members was maintaining small class sizes. Despite this, the elementary level is bearing a disproportionate share of the cuts, and reducing class section ignores what families have repeatedly voiced as essential. These decisions do not reflect what our community has asked for, nor do they serve the best interest of our children. I am also deeply troubled by the reduced access AES students will have to their librarian from 4 days to just barely above half-time. How is it equitable that every other school in the district has a full-time librarian except ours? Altamont students deserve the same access to their library as every other student in the district. If we are truly a district that values reading, we would not be cutting library hours, we would be increasing hours. This is a failure to prioritize literacy and equity. It seems as though savings were found in the transportation budget, and that these funds are being allocated to support the capital improvement project to relieve taxpayer burden. I was on the Future Ready Task Force, and I was actively participating in the meetings. But despite being part of this committee, I would still much rather my kids learn in an outdated environment but have 17 kids in their class than in an updated environment but 24 kids in their class. And I would wager that most people in this community would prefer to see these savings reinvested directly into students' education, like smaller class sizes, TAs in 1st grade, and a full-time librarian, than being spent on infrastructure. I urge you to reconsider these cuts and prioritize our students' needs as you move forward in this budget process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm just making some quick notes. Okay, I don't think there's any more in-person comments, so we'll go to the emails. Okay. This is submitted by Mr. Jason Roberts. Just a second. I have to figure out if I need to redact some of this. I have a student in third grade at Altamont. I've heard there may be only 2 classes next year in fourth grade compared to 3 in third grade this year. My child's experience in third grade has been amazing. They are a smart child who has been challenged with socialization and behavior over the past 3 years. I can say without hesitation that their growth on both fronts have far exceeded our expectations, given in part to the class size afforded. I really can't imagine a fourth grade in which they have 50% more peers. I fear that they will be distracted and will not receive the teacher's attention to allow them to grow at the pace and the intelligence permits. I strongly believe that the school board should allow for 3 classes in fourth grade at Altamont next year. Frankly, it seems irresponsible to have only 2. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Is it okay to say the class grade?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, ooh, we have another one. It's a little bit longer. This is submitted by Catherine Nelson. Dear Guilderland Central School District Board of Education members, I am a parent of a rising first grader and rising fourth grader at Altamont Elementary School, a volunteer in the school library, and an educator. I'm writing today to express my concerns related to the proposed budget for next year. First, I would like to voice my concerns regarding the proposed 2 sections of fourth grade next year. Our students are currently placed across 3 classrooms, and combining these students into 2 sections will result in our fourth graders having one of the largest elementary classes in the district. New students may arrive during the school year, raising class numbers further. Research consistently shows that smaller class sizes benefit students, and making the decision to exceed the recommended class sizes jeopardizes their learning. Additionally, when the district asks the community for feedback on our top priorities for the upcoming budget year, class size is consistently voiced as a top concern. Yet the proposed budget includes plans to create classes that exceed the district's recommendations and Governor Hochul's cap for class sizes. I ask you to take the community's feedback into account and consider adding a 3rd section of 4th grade at AES next year. Secondly, I feel strongly that first grade classrooms should have some support from teaching assistants. First grade is a pivotal year for students. Research shows that students who do not meet grade level expectations in literacy by the end of first grade often continue to be struggling readers. It is critical that our youngest students receive the individual attention and observation they need to ensure a solid foundation for later learning and success in life. Teaching assistants are a crucial piece in ensuring that all of our students are able to access the support they need, especially when the stakes are so high for first graders. Finally, I am extremely disappointed to see that the proposed budget includes a 0.2 reduction for our school librarian. Altamont Elementary School is the only elementary school in the district without a full-time librarian. During the budget season for 2022 and 2023, the community made clear how important it was to increase our library services at AES, and we were given an increase from 0.6 to 0.8. It is incredibly frustrating to see a proposal that cuts those services again just 3 years later. Research consistently shows that access to a school library with a full-time certified librarian has a large impact in boosting children's literacy rates, especially for economically disadvantaged populations. AES has the 2nd highest rate of poverty among the elementary schools in the district, suggesting that a full-time school librarian is particularly important for our building. Instead, we are the only elementary building without a full-time librarian and are now being asked to cut those services further. As a volunteer in the school library each week, I see firsthand the joy students take in exploring the books, the skill with which our librarian supports their curiosity, learning, and love of reading, and the sheer number of books that need to be reshelved, reflecting the success of our librarian in getting books into kids' hands who might not otherwise have access. Cutting AES's library services further is deeply inequitable, and I urge you to reconsider this proposal. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my concerns. I ask you to carefully consider the unique needs of AES and the district's stated mission of ensuring equity and a high-quality education for all students. Sincerely, Catherine Nelson.
Our guests are here.
Oh, okay. So we're going to take a break from the public comment because we have 2 special guests.
I want to welcome our elected representatives who are joining us tonight. We have Senator Pat Fahey, who is joining us, and our new Assembly member, Gabriela Romero. We want to thank you both for joining us tonight. And you're welcome to come up to the microphone and share with us whatever insights you have on how things are going with the state budget. We're always very interested to hear. And then if you have questions for us, or if our board members have questions for you. So welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. And thanks for having us. Thanks for interrupting your proceedings. I like to do this each year, and I'm very pleased this year to be joined by my new colleague, Gabriela Romero. We will tag team a little bit here, if that's okay. And if appropriate, really happy to take questions. I know that sometimes is a break or a little unusual, but happy to take questions or any input. Some of this, any numbers we give you are a little bit up in the air because just today, the governor had her budget proposal in January. We in the Assembly and Senate work for these last good few weeks on a response to that. So just today, what we call the One House resolutions were introduced in both the Senate and the Assembly, and we're still trying to sort through a whole host of that. That's, as you know, a few thousand pages. So let me just run a few of those. And I think your numbers are probably, we were actually texting a little bit beforehand, trying to figure out a couple of those numbers. The good news is, let me just start with the foundation aid. In the Senate, we did add in more than what the governor has proposed. Depending on how you look at the numbers, and overall, the foundation aid was supposed to be up about 2%, a little over 2% in the governor's proposal. So most districts received about 2%. Right now, the Senate is going an additional 2%, although I am, quite frankly, still trying to validate that, because even as recently as yesterday, I thought it was 1 additional percent, so that it would be at least 3% everywhere overall. Bottom line is, and then Gabrielle will tell you a little bit more, it's very similar in the Senate, in the Assembly, 2.9%. The bottom line is the numbers are fluid, but they're all moving in the right direction. So they're all moving up. Where we end up, the One House proposals, I'm much more accustomed to the Assembly and new to the Senate, but the Speaker used to call them our wish lists. Nothing is solid. The only thing that we can say is there is a real interest in going further. And so I do think you will see more, given that while most districts saw an increase, there's an interest in going a little beyond that. So happy to take any questions on that. I know the pre-K trips up a couple of things with the way you look at the numbers, so we understand that. Just a couple of other things on pre-K. We are also trying to increase the floor there. It's still at 5,400 for those that were the early adopters. It's still a low number. I thought we had raised it beyond 54 last year. I thought we were approaching well over 6,000. Again, the numbers are fluid. I know we added more in the Assembly. We were supposed to be going up to a floor of 6,700. I have not seen that in print yet. So a lot can change in even 24 hours, but the bottom line is there still remains tremendous support for pre-K, tremendous support for not penalizing districts. We know you still have a huge differential there, and trying to at least establish the floor. What's hurt us over the years and trying to get that minimum up is that there was much more of a focus on adding newer districts, so there's been this disparity, and I know you're still disadvantaged by that, but there is a recognition. I feel like people are finishing my sentences now on that. That's been a hard thing to explain, because the focus was on adding districts, not making sure there was some parity or equity among all the districts on getting some floor there. So that's a good one. Free school lunches, as you know, tremendous momentum has been made on that with the meals, breakfast and lunch. Tremendous momentum. I mean, we're spending a few $100 million on this in state dollars. And I just have to say this with frustration, and I'm not trying to be partisan. I'm just trying to be, it's the elephant in the room, if you will, or, well, maybe more than one ways. But just today we saw that there may be $1 billion cut from the USDA. We were told that that's an immediate $24 million out of the state budget on school meals. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, and I have to think that $1 billion is going to translate in a lot of negative ways. But just please know, it's the budget is always a very challenging time. It is the most challenging time in the legislature to try to address the needs across the state. This year it's like an alternative universe. I mean, here we are talking about these ads and these additions, and yet the rug can be pulled out from under us. We still don't know how much of the U.S. Department of Education may be eliminated. We don't know how much of these cuts to USDA, the Department of Agriculture, sorry if I'm using acronyms, how much that may affect the school lunch and breakfast meals. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. In the meantime, we are continuing to move forward, but make no mistake, the leader has said it. I know I've read quotes from the speaker. We cannot backfill. There is just, on so many of these, whether it's a Pell Grant, if you're looking at higher ed, or a school lunch program. So there are some very serious clouds. In the meantime, we're trying to focus on what the state budget is. I will say I worry we will be back at this later in the year if the bad news continues regarding a whole host of programs that will affect every school in one way or another. And I would appreciate any feedback on that. I'm trying to get a pulse on what the impact is, whether it's special ed or Title I programs, things of that nature. So that's the school lunches or free school meals. The other one is the cell phone policy. This is another one that's changed a little bit at the last minute. Welcome your feedback on this. As you know, the governor held the very first of her forums about not quite a year ago, in terms of really examining the cell phone policy. I commend her for what she did. A tremendous amount of time was put into this as she went all over the state. I've almost asked myself, like, wow, why didn't we do this years ago? Some of it was COVID, and maybe we all got distracted, but clearly the cell phone problems have only exacerbated since COVID. So my understanding now is we have added some new language that gives a little bit more school district control. I personally have some concern about that. I am strongly in support of what the governor is saying and what the governor is proposing, and I do think we should see some bell-to-bell bans of cell phones. Shout out to all of you that you were early adopters with the middle school, and I know there's been conversations to go beyond that. Obviously, you're way ahead of so many other school districts. I will continue to push on this. I do think we need an aggressive policy. Obviously, we need some flexibility of how you do that, how you implement these changes, and we recognize every district is different, but I just want to note that. The last one, and then I'll turn it, just a couple of more. The school bus mandate. Can I just read you the language, because it's this is the summary I have, and we've been pushing a lot on this because I know there's been a lot of concerns about the ambitious timeline. And by the way, I originally had one of the bills to push electric school buses. This was all pre-COVID, pre the invasion of Ukraine, pre the international energy market going into a complete upheaval. We really thought we would be much further along in terms of the cost of electric buses, in terms of the infrastructure, and obviously the technology. So what sounded great in 2018, we know we are nowhere near as far along as we are now in 2025. So I have supported more flexibility. We may have some ways to go here, but essentially the Senate one house language is saying something to the effect that we're going to modify the zero-emission bus transition requirements to provide additional flexibility for extensions and clarify the extension process itself, require some range certification of the range claims, particularly those made by manufacturers, and make the electrification plans eligible for transportation aid. That's a lot. I'm happy to share this with some of you, but just know we've been hearing from a lot of school districts on this, and I more than recognize, I still believe it's the right thing to do. It's not just money, though. There are some implementation concerns, and we we recognize the need for some flexibility. And I'll stop there and turn it over to Gabriela Romero.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So in very strong comparison to the Senate One House, the Assembly One House does not include policy in our One House. So we don't have things like the zero emission bus mandate or the cell phone policy. We also don't have some of those more sticky subjects like the discovery or the involuntary commitment like you might have been seeing in the news. So we truly stick to the more financial concepts. And we have very similar numbers to the Senate One House. Like Senator Fahey mentioned, the Senate had the proposed 3% increase. We said 2.9, very similar. I wanted to mention two things in addition that I think you might be interested in, which was an additional $100 million in addition to what the governor proposed to the Raise the Age initiatives. Raise the Age, as I'm sure many of you might be familiar with, is an initiative that is for children to be not as criminalized as adults. It allows for them to get access to services instead of going right into the criminal legal system. And especially in the Assembly One House, we added in that the additional $100 million and this additional funding would require immediate assessment for probation-related services instead of releasing children without support, going directly to the spirit of Raise the Age, making sure that our youth are able to get access to services and support instead of kind of releasing children into the street, which I think is probably the biggest gap and the biggest hole that we're seeing in the Raise the Age implementation across New York State. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the Assembly proposed modifications to the Farm to School program, and that has something kind of to do with the free school meals that Senator Fahey mentioned, and this is allowing for the free school meals concept to have farm fresh food actually be implemented into that program so that the kids are not only getting access to free school meals, but they're getting organic and fresh farm food, ideally locally sourced, which is pretty cool. And that's another additional concept that's also with breakfast and snacks. And we included, I think, an additional $100 million there. And, a lot of the things that Senator Fahey mentioned are also included in the Assembly One House, whether it's related to additional funding amounts, and happy to answer questions as well as it relates to the foundation aid formula, which is something that I think we probably have differing wonky distinctions in the way that we modified the foundation aid formula. And I'm happy to talk to any policy wonks that are interested in the exact details that we did. And I have that here if y'all are interested in going over those specific modifications. You can also email it too, but if you want to talk about it, we can.
I don't know if it's appropriate. We're happy to take questions, and I know you always. We know you always have a tight schedule, so we always appreciate the accommodation. But happy to take questions. Again, as we both stressed, it's fluid, but I always think it's important to try to get out here while the budget is in play, so that we can hear from you. And yes, I remember that the speaker is very good about keeping policy out. In the end, a lot of policy goes in. So, but I think it is a strong statement, and it's a philosophical one, which we support. But inevitably, it is a bill that has to pass. Unlike Congress, we do try to move reasonably on time. We don't. We can't print money. We have to balance the budget. So. It is why you see a lot of loading up of the budget bills, because they are must pass bills, and that's why you see policy added.
Do you want to address?
I have one quick question.
Yep, I was going to say, I think we do have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Great.
Okay. Katie?
I have a quick question. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for your continued support, always. Any update on the BOCES aid formula
BOCES.
Yes. Update.
I know we did address the salary. Right now, in the Senate version, we are going from 30, the flexibility on the retirement age, or the salary for those who are retired, from 35,000 to 65,000. Beyond that, I don't know, but we can definitely take that back. I don't know if you know that off the top. It's this was just printed, and we are supposed to get some summaries by tomorrow. So it was just a timing issue, quite frankly. But we certainly weren't going to postpone. What was the other one on that? The reimbursement?
Yeah, that was the one that I was looking for the update, so thank you.
Okay, I know that has come up a lot. I hope that will help with some recruitment and staffing issues.
Yes.
So that's a big jump. Whether it holds, again, whether that holds into the final, I don't know, because there's trade-offs, and as you know, sometimes, well, we have heard a lot of support for it. There is also some opposition out there.
Okay.
But I think it does help, at least in the short term.
Thank you.
Nina.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So first, thank you for being here, too. Echo that. You mentioned the distracted cell phone modification of it, if I heard that correctly. Do you know if the amount that, I know she said 13.5 billion initially, has that also been modified? This is going to be deferred to the school districts more, if I'm understanding correctly?
I do not think the amount has changed, but a lot of the controversy was about the wording and the actual, my understanding is a lot of the schools wanted some flexibility, and I was hearing it from some of the school boards that I've met with as well. That said, I do think we need bell to bell, and that was what's in the governor's proposal. That was modified, at least in the Senate, as yes, not touched just yet in the Assembly, but I do think we will see it, and it will be. That's one now that's going to need to be negotiated. I can read you. I'll just read you some of the language, but essentially what it's saying, it's not addressing whether you use pouches, lockers, or what. However, I think that should be up to the districts, and the lower cost, the better. And some, we hear mixed feedback on that from a number of folks. But the language that we have now is to modify the cell phone ban proposal, requiring consultation with local representatives and families, allowing schools to allow cell phone access during non-instruction time, and prohibiting schools from suspending students for cell phone use violation. I think the controversial piece here is allowing schools to allow cell phone access during non-instruction time. You can please fill me in on what your policy is in the middle school, but I do think there's a lot of merit for bell to bell. I think that there's enough on teachers, and not to have them policing or having to collect cell phones with each period or after lunch, before, handing out before. I just think it fuels confusion. So while this was just adopted in the Senate one house, I have concerns about it.
Thank you.
I have an answer on the BOCES question. My amazing Chief of Staff, Jake, shout out Jake, had an answer for the Assembly One House on the salary cap for BOCES instructors. The Assembly provided $57.9 million to increase the salary cap aid for BOCES instructors from $30K to $40K. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Any other questions, Meredith?
I have a question on the EV buses. So I spoke to a school board member out in Rochester, where they had some buses actually stall out mid-trip with students on them. Is that going to be addressed in future requirements for going EV?
Yes, I have heard that locally as well. We are hearing that again. Some of that is the infrastructure, some of it is the technology. And we've had that in Bethlehem as well. So that is not just Rochester. We've had that locally. That is part of why, again, as somebody who was quite supportive and sponsored one of the original bills on this, there were many bills, we're nowhere near where we thought we would be. Again, you can point to a lot of things, but COVID, the international energy market, everything else, I think it is part of why we need flexibility. And the mantra that I've been using is it's not enough to spend the money. I will say NYSERDA has offered to do some forums. I know they had done a couple a year or two ago. We may schedule one and try to answer more of the questions. But yes, I think that's part of why you need the flexibility. I have recommended a 2-year extension beyond the 2027. That did not make it in to our Senate one house. The governor has also, I don't know if it made it into her budget proposal. I think it was after she introduced her executive proposal, but she has also indicated support for giving some flexibility here. I was also just speaking with Carrie Warner, the Assemblywoman for Saratoga, and where they've had a number of concerns as well. And she is looking at some legislation on how you calculate the ranges and giving some exemptions. I was out in Canajoharie a few weeks ago. They have one route with current technology. It's just not physically possible. Even with a fully charged electric bus, I think there's a lot of merit to making sure that any bus on any route is never below 20%, because we never know when we have a snow emergency. We never know when we have any other kind of emergency. We know a lot more now. We're not where we needed to be. So I will continue to be vocal on the flexibility. I don't know if you're hearing this. Saying.
Yeah. The Assembly proposed $200 million for electric school buses and another $100 million for the EV charger related infrastructure. But I know that the Upstate Caucus is actually working on forthcoming legislation to, what's the proper terminology? Pause or extend the deadline, because it is explicitly like a upstate kind of thing. I think it's Donna Lupardo actually, or Dee Dee, the energy chair. Yeah. So they're working on that. I don't know if it's gonna come before the explicit. I don't know if this mic's working. I don't know if it's gonna come before the. I hope it comes before the end of session, but I know people are talking about it, and it's a lot of upstate people explicitly.
If I could just add, I encourage you to continue to mention, I don't know if there have been current concerns, please fill us in on where Guilderland is, but I know I'm certainly hearing from districts. So where there are issues, it is important. I've talked to NYSERDA a number of times about it. They're willing to do more forums on this, but we recognize it is beyond the funding. And I think we also have an increase in funding, and I should know that number, and I just don't off the top of my head. But we know it's beyond money. There are some flexibility needs here. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just wondering about the timing on the completion of the budget. Will it be on time or?
No, I'm new and I know it's not going to be on time.
Okay, so how late will it be?
Oh boy, we start taking pools and wagers on this. The good news is it's my 13th. I can't even believe it, so I hope it's not an unlucky one. But for the most part, with I think one exception in my years, where it went quite a number of weeks. For the most part, it's 1 to 2 weeks. So, and a number of those years, it was only a couple of days. We're not far apart. In fact, most people have been there longer than I have said this is the best budget proposal yet. I mean, there's a whole host of things that were just shocking, right? Even the foundation aid formula was supposed to be much more, have a lot more surprises in it, given some of the school enrollment drops around the state. So we're not that far apart, but there are issues that Gabriela Romero already mentioned, and some of the policy issues on unrelated to a lot of this, with the exception of the cell phone. That's going to be a big one, I think. I think the governor is going to make that a big issue. Some of the other ones are related to public safety or the mental health issues, things of that nature, that always cause some delays. So it is the policy issues that usually bring us apart.
Well, I'll put in a plug for having it done before April 8th because the board has to adopt our budget at that point.
Yeah.
And if we do benefit from any additional aid, if it comes after that, we can't really use it to address some of the struggles that we're working through.
And please keep reminding everyone of that. I know in past years that has really helped us all to say, we have these school budget votes coming up, and you can't do this to the school districts to have this guessing game to go before voters. So I didn't realize it's April 8th. It seems earlier this year. Sorry?
For the board to adopt.
To
and
adopt.
Other schools will be a little before or a little after that.
Yeah, okay. It seems like sometimes we've had a
Mid-April.
little more, a few more days. But either way, I actually think it does help, because the more we have pressure on, the more the more pencils ultimately have to go down. But I will tell you again, I am. This is not a partisan comment. I know we're in a public building, but the news out of Washington, I think it makes it all the more important that we do have an on-time budget. But it's also a budget that we could be right back at if we do see a U.S. Department of Education decimated, if we do see school lunch programs decimated, your any of the healthcare costs going through. So there's, it's a strange feeling I feel like we're, again, having conversations that could change very dramatically.
Should we call to ask to, about this April 8th date, the governor's office or?
I think just as you're relaying it, with the school boards, with the
Okay.
teachers, with
So I can
and
call you
all
two
the
again and-
administrators, all your
Okay.
groups, the Superintendents Association.
Oh,
I
right,
think
right,
Most
okay.
people are mindful, many at least upstate,
Mm-hmm.
although not as much the Big Five, but most of the not New York City, but most of the other upstate and Hudson Valley members are aware, and it is something I know that used to come up all the time. Like, we need to get the information because you have to go before the
Right.
voters. That date is set. Is it May 20? May 20.
May 20th? Is
Third
it?
Tuesday of May.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
20.
So, right. So
Yeah.
the 20th.
But we have to adopt April 8th, so.
Right. So we
just
have
keep calling
to. Yes. I
Albany.
remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming. I did want to also thank you for the update on the electric buses. We, just to paint a picture for you, we are literally counting our pennies right now. We are extremely tight, and that has definitely been a big concern, especially the timeline that was attached to that. So we appreciate that you're following up on the policy and giving us an update on that. Just with regard to this, we're not calling it cell phone, but you know what I'm talking, the new policy. The aid that may or may not come attached with that, any kind of clarity around that would be helpful to us, because money is so tight right now that even something that seems like it's a relatively small expenditure is a huge expenditure for us. We're looking at cutting a librarian by 0.1 and losing TAs. This is not a fun time for us at all. It's a very difficult time. And so if it comes down to every penny, something that seems rather benign and rather inexpensive really can become a big deal. So I just expressed that to you.
I think the cell phone one, I think, is discretionary, that it would have to be applied for. There would be some time, but I hear you. And that's why I think this, I know for a while there was a lot of talk about pouches and school districts having to incur a cost there. But we've seen others do it in a much more cost-effective way. But either way, it does have implications, so we hear you. And if I could just add, the school bus issue, the EV buses, I'm surprised at how contentious this has become. And I do think it's important that you convey it as well to others, that you just need flexibility and some time, because it's being portrayed as just a rural, small issue. And I don't really think that's fair, because there are costs there that had not, I can guarantee you, I would have bet my house that the buses it would have been closer in price, just like EV vehicles, passenger vehicles are much more comparable now. In many cases, they are comparable, the cost of them, especially then when you add in operating costs. That has not been the case with buses. Again, it has not been as advanced. So I think it is important to convey that, because we don't want this being pitched as, oh, well, that's just a couple of districts. Quite frankly, I'm hearing it in a number of areas. Many of you I know are not opposed. You recognize it's a good, it's the right goal to have, but it is being portrayed as a very small issue when it's not, and it's not just confined to a few school districts. So, any help on that? I know the Big Five, the Education Conference Board, NYSET, and about a few others who I'm not remembering, the superintendents, a number of them did a joint effort on EV buses together, and that was very helpful as well. I don't think they had a discrete ask, but just the fact that they've coalesced around this issue is helpful, and I think it's important that they continue to do so. It hasn't turned out to be as easy as I would have guessed.
Great. Well, thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate you
and
coming.
please always feel free to follow up. We know that all of this will change, but thank you for also giving us your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you also for your service. Many of you know I served on the Albany School Board, what feels like decades ago, but I do know how well paid you are, so thank you for thank you for the dedication and the service that you give to our community. It does matter, and it holds all of our feet to the fire. So
Thank you.
Thank you both.
More public comments. Yes. Let's go back to the public comments. Does anyone remember where I left off? I think we heard from Miss Nelson, right?
Yes, it's the one right underneath that.
Okay.
You
So
read two, I think.
I think we're on Watts Webster? No?
There was one in between, I believe.
There was, just a moment. Ah, yes, thank you.
You're
A new one,
welcome.
okay. This is from Sharmila Kadaji regarding the importance of teaching assistants in first grade. Dear Board of Education members, my name is Sharmila Kadaji, and I am a TA at Pine Bush Elementary School. I have been working as a TA for the last 9 years. I am writing to emphasize the importance of having teaching assistants in first grade classrooms. As you know, the early years of education are crucial for a child's development, and first grade students greatly benefit from additional support. In addition to the academic guidance, teaching assistants play a vital role in supporting students socially and emotionally. Many first grade students are still developing their social skills and need consistent guidance to manage their emotions, behavior, and interactions with peers. Having teaching assistants available allows for more personalized attention to each child's unique needs, helping them feel secure and supported as they navigate the critical stage of their educational journey. Furthermore, the behavior management in a first grade classroom can be challenging, and additional staff ensures that teachers can maintain a positive and productive learning environment for all students. With the right support, students are more likely to develop confidence, resilience, and a love for learning that will carry them throughout their educational careers. I urge you to consider the valuable role that teaching assistants can play in the success of our first grade students. Their presence not only enhances academic performance, but also fosters social and emotional growth, setting a strong foundation for the years to come. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope we can continue to prioritize the well-being and development of our youngest learners. Warm regards, Shamila Kadaji. The next one is from Claire Watts Webster. Good afternoon. It has come to my attention that there is a proposal to cut teaching assistants for first grade in the Altamont Elementary School. Many parents would be happy to come out to express our deep concerns that this negatively impacts children's learning and development at a crucial transition from kindergarten. Looking at last year's budget, it appears that the TA salaries for all elementary schools was $518,855, which represents less than half of 1% of the total budget. It seems absurd to get rid of a valued and important service that consists so little, that costs so little of the total budget when the support the TAs provide to students and teachers is immeasurable. Please do not take away the teaching assistants. They are incredibly valuable and cherished component of their children's learning, not only academically, but also in creating a positive, supportive environment for all children to learn and prosper. Sincerely, Claire Watts Webster. Okay. This one is from Carly Digesser. As the planning and budgeting for the 2025-2026 begins to take shape, I strongly urge you to consider having 3 classes for the upcoming 4th graders and not reduce the TAs for the upcoming 1st graders. Both of my children will be directly impacted by this decision, as my son is a current 3rd grader at AES and my daughter is currently in kindergarten at AES. I am very concerned about how the larger classes and lack of TAs will affect my children's learning. The current kindergarten class already has significant needs and behavioral challenges to make learning difficult at times, and this is with TA support. In addition, I am very concerned how my 3rd graders' learning will be impacted if the class sizes are reduced to 2 sections, going from 17 to 24 students per class. With the academic material only getting more challenging in 4th grade, I am very concerned my child is going to fall behind from the lack of personal instruction. I want both of my children to reach their fullest academic potential, and with the proposed budget cuts for next year, I do not see this happening. Sincerely, Carly DeGassner. I think there's still a few more. Oh. I don't know if this one is for public. It doesn't really specify. So I'm going to keep going.
It's the last one I see.
Was it the last one?
It's the last one, I think.
Okay. We have more emails on the topic, but they don't seem to be for public comment. Just give me 1 second to confirm. Okay. Everyone agrees? Yes. We're good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for their public comments. Okay. So state budget update already happened. We are on to budget development.
Good evening, everyone. Our program tonight is really to provide an opportunity for the board and community to ask some questions. But before we do that, I wanted to do a very brief update from where we left off a week ago. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom here to talk about kind of where we are now. Let me do one more thing here. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. Give me 1 second. So I wanted to sort of pick up where we left off last week, Tuesday. Dr. Van Alstyne and I spent quite a bit of time setting the context for where we are, trying to understand what our revenues are, and working to close a pretty significant shortfall. And after we shared with you a number of present proposals, we concluded with the reality that what we shared at the end of last week was still $450,000 short of a balanced budget, and that we wanted to have a little bit of additional time to think about the 3 bullets under that statement of, what do we do? Do we use some additional fund balance or reserves? Do we make some additional reductions? If so, what? Or some combination of those options. So in the ensuing 7 days, we've been doing some additional work on this, and we have essentially 4 proposals I want to share with everyone tonight, and then open up everything to questions. So here they are, and it's a mix of additional reductions as well as looking at our fund balance to a certain extent. So here are the 4 things that we are proposing, and I'll just take a couple minutes to talk through them. The first is to look at a high school special education teaching position that has been vacant all year. We had a resignation from this position within the first couple days of this school year. And to the credit of our high school team and some creative thinking, they've been able to structure the program for our high school comprehensive skills students so that 2 classroom teachers, 2 special education teachers, plus their team of TAs have been able to run the program and actually do a very, very nice job. So what we're proposing, if you'll recall, last week we talked about the need for an additional section for our self-contained programs at the middle school. What we're proposing is that we reallocate this open position at GHS that we did not fill to the middle school, which would bring us a savings of $92,200. So that's one. Similarly, the next item down, we have had an open auto mechanic position for well over 2 years, have not been able to fill it. And I should go back and say we also tried to fill that special education teaching position for a good portion of the first part of the year without success. So we tried to fill it and could not. Same is true for this auto mechanic position, which has been open for at least 2 years. We are proposing that we eliminate this position in the next budget for a savings of $89,000. And the third proposal here is rather complicated, but we have are in the position to earn something called an educational contribution fund, which is a payment that the school district will be getting as a result of our pilot agreements with solar companies who have arrays within our catchment area that we have had agreements with. And part of that agreement is that they actually give us some money back to be used for one-time expenses. We have a couple ideas of what those one-time expenses could be, but one of them, to help us with our immediate budget concern here, is to take $100,000 of that fund and apply it to the installment purchase agreement for technology that is in the current budget. The total of that was $259. We would use $100,000 of that fund to offset that cost. In so doing, it takes our $450,000 shortfall and reduces it to $168,100. And we are proposing that we take from our fund balance and reserves to cover that difference. And what this proposal does is try to look at all of the very difficult decisions that are included in this proposal and try to look at how are we spreading the pain of this across areas. Yes, we're reducing teaching positions. We are proposing reducing TA positions. We are reducing an administrative position. And with this proposal, we'd also be reducing some non-instructional support as well. Obviously, all of this is not ideal, but we do need a balanced budget. I am not sure that we can count on additional foundation aid. Even if the state budget is on time, we have already received close to 6% increase in foundation aid in the governor's budget. Our challenge is that our expense-driven aids are down dramatically because of ironically, our dramatic savings in transportation means that we are getting far less aid. So our aid, if you'll remember from last week, is actually $133,000 less proposed for next year than it is for this year. And then just a couple other important data points. Our tax levy limit is 2.22%, which generates about $1.8 million in additional revenue. Our increases in health insurance alone are $2.3 million. and climbing. So there's a lot to balance there. So having said that, I'm happy to take some questions. I know there was lots of information that was shared in public comment that board members may want to ask some more about. So I will pause there and
I just want to let you know there's one more public comment. So do you want me to hold on the public comment or?
you're the board president. You get to choose.
I feel like I should read it before the questions begin. Is that okay? All right. And I do apologize, Ms. Manzella. It was right in front of my face, and I ignored it by accident. Okay. Dear Ms. Gonzalez-Parker and members of the Guilderland Central School District Board of Education, I am writing to express my deep concern and dismay regarding the board's recent decision to restructure the administrative oversight of the visual and media art and music department programs. The decision to eliminate the dedicated art supervisor position and replace it with 2 teacher leader stipend roles supporting a merged fine arts administrator position significantly undermines the specialized leadership and support these disciplines require. Music and visual media arts are distinct, performance-based disciplines, each with unique pedagogical, evaluative, and administrative needs. Effective oversight and advocacy for these programs require administrators with deep content knowledge and experience in their respective fields. By consolidating oversight under an administrator who may not hold certification or expertise in both areas, the district risks weakening the overall strength of these programs. Additionally, APPR evaluations conducted by administrators lacking subject-specific qualifications may fail to provide meaningful and appropriate feedback, thereby diminishing instructional quality. Furthermore, maintaining the art, facts, business department administrator role is a prudent financial decision. Given that the district is already anticipating cost savings due to a transition from a tenured senior administrator to a less experienced replacement, there is a natural reduction in expenses. Preserving this role would ensure continuity and stability for students and faculty while still aligning with budgetary considerations. The arts are a vital component of a well-rounded education, fostering creativity, critical thinking, and cultural appreciation. Strong administrative leadership is crucial to ensuring that our students continue to receive high-quality instruction in these disciplines. I urge the board to reconsider its decision and maintain dedicated and knowledgeable oversight for both the music and visual media arts programs. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to your response and hope the district will prioritize the long-term success of our fine arts education programs that 2 of my children are products of. Sincerely, Anne M. Manzella. Just want to make sure there's nothing else hiding back here. Okay. So thank you again, Ms. Manzella, and thank you to everyone that submitted a public comment. These are definitely not easy times. Are there any questions?
Any questions at all about the budget?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question.
Rebecca?
So, my question's on the fund balance, the 168. What percentage is that number of the total fund balance?
I will get that for you in a moment.
And then I know we've had this conversation before, but, you know, the concern with using fund balance, as, you know, I'm preaching to the choir here, is that if we're using it for ongoing expenses, it's going to be a problem next year that is unresolved with this year's budget. Correct?
Yes, that is, I mean, we have in past years used small amounts of fund balance. In the last couple years, we've really tried to pull back on that because we've shared that graph with all of the board members that we are really lagging behind our peers in the percentage of fund balance that we have relative to our budget. So we've been trying to be mindful of that. But we're also trying to preserve programs as much as we possibly can.
Can I ask
go
a
ahead, sorry.
follow-up on that? I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
So we didn't use fund balance last year,
That's
right?
correct.
Do
We
you know when
appro-
the last time we used like roughly 150 or 168,000?
We appropriated $20,000 of reserves for this year's budget, but we did not actually, we've not used the money, and we don't project to need to use the money. But in the last few years, we have appropriated, we've budgeted with some form of reserves, but it has decreased each year. But we haven't actually appropriated them. So we've used them in the budget, and then we've experienced surplus in other areas that don't require us to make the transfers into the general fund. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you happen to know offhand though, like how, when we've used, when we put into the budget fund balance allocations, When, what year roughly did we use this amount?
We decreased our reserves, so used the money in terms of transferring it and spending it, paying tax certiorari refunds. I don't know the exact year, but the 2 years that we did have the net decrease or appropriating spending them were tax certiorari refunds and contract transportation increases. But I can get the specific years and amounts for you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nina.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask a follow-up to that point. It's similar. So as we're working to catch up with the other regional districts in the fund balance area, to not go into an area of concern where, if we look at down the road having to continue to go to account for enrollment and that sort of thing. So where are we in terms of that window of safety before it gets, is there a concern for next year and that sort of thing of how much more that disparity can get?
So broadly speaking, we do have concerns for next year that are about the continuations of the trends that popped up this year. Specifically, the two I will identify are further enrollment declines because, as I shared at the last meeting, the stark drop in births within the district have not yet entered kindergarten yet. So if there's no change to the birth to kindergarten sort of translation or realization ratio, and then we have larger cohorts graduating, we'll have fewer students. That's concern one because fixed expenses and foundation aid is a per pupil state aid. I mean, it's adjusted, but essentially you get a foundation amount per pupil. So if we have fewer students, we will get fewer resources from the state. So concern one. Concern two is the trend in healthcare costs, particularly prescription drug costs. Our healthcare committee and the consortium we're part of have both taken steps to try to reduce the increase in prescription drug costs, but this is a nationwide trend that is affecting all kinds of organizations and entities beyond just school districts, but it's something that I have concerns about the impact for the future. In terms of the fund balance and reserves question, I don't have the numbers I shared this summer or when we closed our books with me handy, but we did significantly close the gap between our peers and where we are. Now, this is cyclical because one of the places that districts most often use their reserves are capital projects. So we are planning on using the capital reserve and the project we're proposing that would decrease the reserves, save taxpayers money, and then we would look to rebuild the capital reserve over the next few years again as we prepare for our capital project. But I would say our reserves right now are healthy compared to where they were, say, 2 years ago. Do you have a follow-up?
Just to follow. I think it was like 14 to 17 million was I remember seeing those numbers. But I just want to say the capital reserve amount that's going to be used towards the project or that's proposed for the project, are those totals added together in the proposed amount here to the capital reserve, or did that not? How does that factor in? And when we total use of the fund balance?
So the reserve data I shared where we compared to suburban council districts did not include the transfer that was made at the last board meeting to the capital reserve. The capital reserve amount that's going to be planned for the proposed capital project resolution includes the transfer that was made last meeting and the most of the funds that are currently in the capital reserve. That capital reserve was the transfer, as one of the commenters mentioned, as the surplus from largely not spending on contract transportation. This is an example of a one-time savings that it's ideal to use for a one-time expense, because if we used it for a recurring cost, that would further exacerbate a future challenge. None of this is to suggest that using $168,000 or $168,100 of fund balance and reserves is an ideal situation. That's why additional reductions are also on the slide, that we are going to try to work to hopefully reduce this amount a little bit before we have a final budget.
Just real quick, let me make sure Gloria doesn't have any questions. Okay.
I have a quick question about the fund balance and related to what Nina was saying. One of the reasons to keep the high fund balance is to have that, or an average fund balance, is to have the higher rating for spending or getting loans, right? Something like that. At what point are we in jeopardy of that consequence again? Like, is there a cliff there, or is it just kind of a general percentage?
What is looked at is sort of sustained patterns. We benefit because we've increased our fund balance and reserves over the last few years. Having a cycle of using them for capital projects is not going to imperil our ability to borrow. In some ways, it'll help us because not only will we have lower borrowing costs, but we'll be borrowing less, so we'll pay no interest in what we have in the capital reserve. So that's one. I have the number. At the close of the fiscal year, our fund balance and reserves, our reserves were $13.3 million approximately. That was an increase over the previous few years. We've seen the trend growing up. Now, some of that was money we recouped from borrowing for the tax certiorari bond because we'd paid that money out and it was put back into reserves to replenish our cash on hand. Going back to the basics, reserves and fund balance, there's two broad categories. Unrestricted fund balance, you're allowed to carry 4% of the next year's budget in cash on hand that is not required to be used for any specific purpose. It's essentially it's essentially like the emergency fund. If something happens, you have that 4%. The district, from what I know, has always carried the 4%. Reserves are money that is saved in designated funds that are legally authorized for various purposes. So we have reserves for benefits, TRS, ERS, the capital reserve. We've refunded the tax certiorari reserve. So any judgments that may come out this year, we would be able to pay from that. So those are our two categories of savings.
I had a question, sorry, to provide clarification for the community. We actually moved the facilities project into the capital project, right? The for Pine Bush, the carpeting, right? Just so that we didn't take something from the capital project, but we actually moved a necessary, correct? Just to provide some clarification for community question.
So we are ripping the carpets out in this budget that we're talking about right now. So next year, the plan is to remove the carpets, I believe, from the reading room. And then also some window replacements that are not in the capital project. The capital project itself has funds for replacement of those carpets.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I ask a question about the two special ed teachers? So it says we're going to hire 2 special ed teachers to expand the continuum of services for primary students with significant needs at GES and WES. So my question is, are these the CSP students, or are these a different group of children, or?
It's both.
Okay.
So this is a group of children, primary age,
Okay.
primarily who already attend Guilderland Elementary or Westmere Elementary, who would benefit from being placed in a classroom setting that is more opportunities for mainstreaming, more of that kind of an experience. I bet, I'm thinking that you're thinking, well, why aren't the 2 in Pine Bush?
Right, that was my question.
And it's where the children are.
Okay, okay.
So we will still have some group of students who will be in our CSP classrooms at Pine Bush and at GES, but we have some new children moving in who, through the early evaluation process, we know that they're going to need something other than a traditional kindergarten setting. So that's what this would address.
Oh, okay. I wanted to make sure that wasn't a typo. I also have a question about I guess the sections, the number of sections at Altamont and the librarian, because we did hear a lot about the reduction in librarian. So I just want to make sure that I understand this. So this year in third grade, we had 3 sections of third grade at Altamont, and now they're going to go to 2 next year?
Yes, so
Okay.
let me kind of remind everybody about this process. Because we said early in the presentation that we have maintained our class size guidelines. So I put those back up. These guidelines have been in place since the recession, pretty much. I think we changed them in 2010 or so. So K2 is 18 to 23, and grades 3-5 are 21 to 25. Last year in third grade, I should have brought, hold on. We had, well, I'll just. Last year in third, or this year in third grade, we had 3 sections. It was kind of on the bubble. And so we left it at the 3 sections, so there's 17 students in those, which, as you can see, is below our class size guidelines for grade 3. Our financial circumstances this year are such that we basically have to follow our guidelines. And so we have 49 students currently scheduled to be in 4th grade next year, which gives us this chart, which I'm going to show again because you can see there are lots and lots of places across the district where we have class sizes that are toward the upper end of the guidelines. Because universally across all 5 buildings, all 6 grades and all 5 buildings, we just went strictly with our guidelines. So there's a couple places here where, you know, we have concerns. And I put asterisks next to them because there are grades that we are going to watch because enrollment fluctuates between March and August, honestly. We have 3 unassigned built into this budget to address those places where we actually go above the guidelines and we have some concerns. So yes, in grade, the 3rd graders this year have 3 sections, but because they are within that 21 to 25 range, it has gone to 2 sections.
2 sections with 20 students in each class. Okay.
Yes, one will be 24 and one will be 25. Go ahead.
Is there a state maximum for these class sizes?
No, New York City has, I think it's in regulation, they have class size guidelines, but there are no class size guidelines for the rest of the state. Some contracts, including our own, have an upper limit. I believe our upper limit by contract is 30 students, but we have established these class size guidelines. And notice it's not limits, it's a guideline, because we can't always fall perfectly within them because we can't necessarily guarantee where our children are going to be in any given grade. But there is no state guideline on how many students in a class.
Can you explain why the Altamont Elementary School librarian hours have been cut in the budget and why it was deemed an equitable decision based on the availability of the librarians at all the other elementary schools?
So, you know, these are not easy decisions to make. So, as we look across all the areas where we could find some savings, that was one that did come to bear for one reason, and it's only one. 3 sections of our special education self-contained classrooms moved out of that building from last year to this year. 2 went to Pine Bush, 2 went to Guilderland Elementary School. So that leaves 15 classroom sections at Altamont. That is not the whole story, though, because we do look at what we call specials and the number of sections for things like art, music, and PE. And looking at the numbers of sections absolutely drives the number of FTEs we have in those areas. But library isn't a special. Our elementary students go to library 1 time a week. for 30 minutes with their classroom teacher. And so if you take a building like Altamont with 15 sections, if there are 3 days, 0.6 is generally the equivalent of 3 days, there would be 5 sections of library classroom each day. They're each 30 minutes, so that's 2.5 hours out of a 6-hour school day for children and a 7-hour and 45-minute day for the librarian. So our feeling is there is ample time in between for students if they wanted to go on a day that isn't their library day to get a book. Earlier today, I wanted to make sure I'm understanding how our libraries work at the elementary level. And I asked our 5 principals, so what is the frequency with which students go to the library outside of that 30-minute time on their day when it's assigned? And the answer is it varies by building. And why that is, I think some of it is, I'm not sure, the structure of the day, the nature of the librarian's activities, what is physically in the library. For example, Linwood has a cozy corner in there, which is a place where children go to de-escalate or have a calming moment. So there are different variables in each of the buildings that do that. So the thinking is that is sufficient time for students to get their library books, go extra if they need to, if they do, and still be able to, maintain enough programming.
So if there's no librarian there, do the students still have access to the space at all, or is it closed completely?
I'm going to say that depends. That could vary by building. If the librarian isn't there, unless there is a volunteer, or if the teacher was to take the class there, it would be closed.
I have a sentence. It's not really a question. It's just something I feel very strongly about. I know we have no money. I get that, but I just feel very strongly that we need to find a way to keep the first grade classroom TAs. They are such an instrumental part to the classroom. I know it's a lot of money. I know, but I would be remiss if I didn't say anything. And I know that some of the comments this evening, public comments, had mentioned that. I don't know. There's just got to be a way.
What's the exact figure?
Sorry, I just want to also speak to the TAs. I know that the issue of the numbers, right, that's obviously issue we're looking at, but TAs provide so much of a role for students and for teachers. I don't know if there's any way to look at that. But so can you quantify how many TAs there will be, if that does go into effect, how many TAs are available in the first grade at that point if we do reduce those TAs?
This 48 hours represents the number of hours in each of our first grade classrooms. So if this proposal were to go through, there would not be a 3-hour TA in every first grade classroom. We would maintain our 3-hour TAs at the kindergarten level. I don't think anyone is arguing that this is a great idea. It's not. But it's also, I don't know where else we come up with $365,600. We are one of the few school districts that has teaching assistants in classrooms in this way. Most of our neighbors have much more limited teaching assistant placements in their classrooms, which isn't to justify this. I'm just giving a context that it's not like we're going to become an outlier here. Honestly, this idea landed on this page because we have 8 retirements and I don't want anyone to lose a job. I don't have data, I don't have a great rationale, and I know we have some ladies here. I'm not happy at all about bringing this forward, but I also don't know where else we come up with that kind of a resource. The other thing I just want to mention, because it was in the public comment about the cost, that's only the salary cost that the public comment individual was saying. It was 580. That's only the salary, it's not the benefits as well, which increases that number probably by another 30%, give or take. So I am open to ideas. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I don't know if this is an idea or not, but you had mentioned on the third bullet point from tonight's slide, the March 11th update, about the educational contribution fund, that the pilot earnings was 250,000, but yeah, maybe I misheard you, but we allocated 100,000 additional revenue from that.
So we are recommending allocating 100,000, and it would go to offset.
That was the figure for the technology purchases, not the pilot that she gave.
Okay.
So that was the two, and I don't remember the exact dollar, but it was 250 or 60
I have it up.
something.
It's the cost, the technology for the installment purchase agreement of 259. That would become 249, 159. Boy, I'm struggling. 159 when we offset by that. Essentially, it's like grant funding.
Okay.
You asking about the extra?
What's that?
You asking about you said it was,
The difference?
we're getting 250,000 from
No.
that?
No,
I
the
think
total
that's
is-
the 259 figure is what we're spending on technology. Our proposal is take $100,000 and put it towards that, so that there's an additional $100,000 in revenue.
Is the revenue only $100,000?
No, it is closer to 500,000. But remember, it's for one-time only expenses.
What are we doing with the other revenue from that?
We have
It's a
not really
multi-year-
allocated it yet.
It's not fixed in terms of time frame. So some of the things that we've,
Is there a reason why we're not putting it all towards that? If we have $500,000?
yes, because that would create a fiscal cliff.
Yes.
It must be
Remember-
misunderstanding.
Use though a portion of it for those teachers' assistants.
So
Like a portion of it, recognizing that it would not be sustainable
Mm-hmm.
long term. It's still money that we will be seeing this year, correct?
there are,
The next year.
Next
We
year,
will be having the same
we'll make,
conversation.
yeah.
Only worse.
And next year, we won't have the opportunity for attrition, so we'll be laying people off.
Next year we won't, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We wouldn't have the
We'll have to lay
opportunity for attrition, so you'll be laying off you would be laying off staff rather than not replacing people who retire.
Just a quick question. Last year, the budget came in that the foundation aid was higher than we anticipated, right? Do you know how much that was, the difference was afterwards, like 20,000 or something like that? I can't remember exactly.
So it's I'll just say, I don't remember the number from last year. It's unlikely that we'll see an increase this year because the representatives who are here today talked about potentially going from 2% to 3% or 2% to 4% as a due minimum. We received, I think, like 5.6% foundation aid increase. So unless they're changing the data significantly, which their proposals seem much more in line with just a due minimum, I would not anticipate us receiving a foundation aid increase. Now, doesn't say we wouldn't like one.
I just have a question. I want to confirm we are not going over the tax levy with this.
We are-
Okay. And Ms. Steiger had mentioned something about the capital project. Would you mind reading that sentence again? I'm sorry. At this point, it's like a blur. Is that accurate? Thank you.
The savings this year and what we're not spending on on contract transportation are going to the capital reserve. A portion of those were appropriated or transferred the resolution to transfer those was approved at the last board meeting. The savings from contract transportation is built into this budget, and it was the only wonky slide I showed last time, but we have savings from not spending on contracts. We have increased spending on transportation salaries. We have increased wear and tear on buses. We have increased costs on those things, but we have decreased aid for transportation aid. So we have savings for next year, but it's not the $2+ million that we've reduced contract transportation. But those savings are used to support the budget. In fact, I mean, if we did not have those savings, the cuts that would be talked about would be much more significant. So those are what are allowing us to keep a lot of existing staff. So they're not used for the capital project. We just couldn't use the ones from this year because if we use those, they would be one-time funds and again, create that fiscal cliff.
Marie, I know you and I had spoken about this before, but as dire as our situation is it not accurate that other districts locally are like having a deficit of 2 million, 3 million for the same reason because of the health insurance costs?
You know, it's a mixed terrain out there. We have some of our neighboring districts got 10% foundation aid increase and can't explain why, and others that got less than 2. But I have many colleagues who are making $2 and $3 million worth of cuts because of just a very, there's just a lot of variables here that are difficult. And, our particular mix are things over which we do not have control. I've mentioned our tax certiorari claims. If I didn't have to, have a slide that says we're spending $747,000 to pay back just 1 year of our tax certiorari, we would not be talking about TAs and lots of other things. And that $740,000 cost is going to carry forward for the next several years.
Is that Crossgates?
That's several of our assessment claims that we did not prevail on. So there's that. And then there's the escalation of health insurance costs. And I think Senator Fahey referenced just the uncertainty of federal funding. We have $1.9 million of federal dollars in Titles 1, 2, 3, 4, and then through IDA and in 611 and 619 grants that support many, many staff. So that should that go away, we're going to need to, and they are all essential positions. They are positions that support our English language learners, our students with disabilities, our students in our Title I schools. We will need to go to the operating budget that we're talking about tonight to close that gap. And it would be devastating. So, none of this is, something to celebrate. But, I'll just speak personally. I feel strongly that making difficult decisions now will make a positive difference down the road for the next groups of students who come. When districts fail to right size, to address the fiscal challenges in the moment, they grow, they multiply, and the impact is actual cuts that affect programs, services, experiences for kids. As difficult as this is, there is not a single educational program that children have this year that they won't have next year. Will there be fewer supports in first grade? Yes. But there will be nothing, and we've lived through a time in the past when I couldn't say that the children who were in 6th grade in 2010 were going to have the same experiences as the children in 7th grade the following year. They just didn't. So this is the time to make tough decisions. Now, maybe, because we're not done yet, so we have to get to April 8th. We are going to continue working on finding ways to make this better. We talk about it all day, every day, looking for creative ways to put more resources back into this budget, to trim where we can, so that we can do more. To Tara's point, I just don't know where we go for $365,000. Maybe it's we reduce the number of hours of TA time in the first grade, but again, that's still a big number.
So go ahead, Rebecca.
I just have one more about that first bullet point about reallocating the open GHS special ed
Yep.
teacher. Earlier in this academic year, we heard from a lot of parents disappointed with the high school special ed experience. Has there been any update about that in terms of not filling that position? Obviously, the position hasn't been filled, so the year has gone on. But has there been any feedback?
I don't know if Lisa Knowles is here. So the year has actually been, I'm going to say, good. I would also say I think everybody works really hard. These are challenging positions, but it's been a good year for these children. And so, Lisa, I'm going to let you weigh in.
Actually, the way classrooms were reallocated to keep the class sizes reduced, but the staff move to support them has worked out really well. Our teachers have developed very positive relationships with the families, and the team of TAs and teachers have really come together, and the students are doing well and seem to be making progress and moving forward, which we can ask for. So part of the concern too is bringing in another new staff member to develop relationships, new relationships that we've already had a really good thing going. So it's working right now.
Thank you.
Can I actually I have a question, probably more for Lisa. So there are 2 sections at the high school right now?
2 teachers serving the students. So we reassign caseloads, and 2 teachers are teaching all the classes that the groups of students need.
And there are 25 students?
Total, about, yeah.
Okay. How many, there's 1 section at Farnsworth right now?
Right now, yes.
Okay, and then we're adding a second teacher there for a second 2
Yes.
teachers next year? I guess my question is, Farnsworth is only projected to have 15 students versus the 25 at the high school. So are the parents genuinely happy with it, or is it just us saying that it's actually going well? Because that's a very big, that's a 10-student discrepancy with the same amount of teachers.
Understood. We have 6 or 7 transitioning up to the middle school from elementary, so we need to separate them, and age ranges, etc., require 2 separate classrooms.
So according to the numbers, it's only an increase in 4, which I understand some of those students went up to the high school probably.
Well, we'll be transitioning some up. Some will be exiting from the high school.
I guess my overall, and then I'll get to you.
Okay.
My overall concern is just if it's 15 students versus 25 and we're putting 2, when we're talking about our CSP students, 10 students is a huge difference to have just two teachers. Like, why 2 teachers for 15 and only 2 teachers for 25? Because I understand
the needs of the students of our upper 18 to 21-year-olds are vastly different than our entering middle schoolers.
I can't hear you.
This on? Oh, I don't know.
Sorry.
You have to talk right into it.
Right into it. Okay. The needs of our entering middle schoolers from elementary are vastly different than the needs of our 18 to 22-year-olds who are primarily in school to work programs, functioning more independently, getting ready to transition.
Okay.
So we are able to meet their needs with our school to work program, with our job coaches. We have more adults, job coaches, teaching assistants tied to these 2 programs at the high school versus the middle school who support the entire program.
Yep.
I just want.
I was just saying, so the course, the actual program for our high schoolers looks different than it does for our middle schoolers, which would.
Yes.
There's actually more adults who interact with our high school students than the 2 classroom teachers. Is that fair?
Correct, because we have job coaches, we have our business teachers, school to work transition coordinators, multiple TAs. We kept all the TAs from the 3rd class and redeployed them to the other 2 sections. So more hands on deck at the high school.
I just wanted to add the enrollment projections for self-contained classes. When I make them are often just rolling students up. I'm not able to assess needs, who moves up, who is placed where. And a lot of when we make the enrollment projections, the first criteria for the budget is what do we have for general ed section, regular ed sections, and we We do those with the enrollment projections, and then when Lisa and her team make their budget proposals, they are doing a more fine-tuned analysis of what the needs are at each building, which is why her proposals have changes to staff across the district, because the needs and the opportunities that they're offering are different for each building.
Okay. I'm just,
Yeah.
we heard from so many families at the beginning of the year on this, so that's why I want to make sure we're not just kind of putting them off to the side in the budget. And I also wanted to clarify with other school districts in the suburban council, they're teachers' aides, not teachers' assistants, so they've kept their aides, they just don't have the assistants.
Yes, they're different roles, actually,
Yep.
though.
Thank you. So
Other questions?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say that none of us feel really great about this budget, including the people who have worked really hard to present it to us. I am privy to a little behind the scenes, and so is Kelly, and they've literally been looking under rocks to try to avoid some of these things that we're really having a hard time with. So I appreciate the hard work you put into it. I do want to recognize it. Back to the federal funding. As ugly as this is now, nobody's going to lose nobody's going to be laid off. But if we lose the federal funding, how many people are we talking about? Do we know?
There's so much uncertainty that it's not possible to project.
Okay.
Other than to say, if federal funding were eliminated, it would be significant. Right. So if we look at, when we do our budgeting figure, if the entry-level teacher is about $92,000, $92,200, I think. If we're talking about a multi-million-dollar reduction, that's what, 20 teachers? And that's,
Would that
again,
be
we're
for
not,
this year or next year, though? Or we don't know? Okay.
Can I make a comment? I'm not saying that people haven't worked hard behind the scenes, and if there's anything,
Kim, I don't know why you need to take everything so personally. I meant
Blanca,
in
stop.
general.
Please
I meant
stop
in
and let me
general.
actually finish. Your comment after mine was unnecessary because this is a question and answer. We have rights to ask questions. None of us think that they're not looking under rocks and digging, because we know when we sit with every single one of them that they have this school at the heart. And we all know that. But we all have a right to ask any questions. That's our job. That is our job, is to ask questions. So I
don't
apologize.
disagree.
It's not that I'm taking it personally,
I don't disagree
but that
with
was,
your question.
to say that was just,
So
no.
I always hold my questions for last. And
That's
that was
great.
last. Poor timing, perhaps, because you
Poor
felt it
timing.
was right after yours. I've just been holding it for a while.
Poor timing.
So let me talk a little bit about next steps. This has been an unusual budget year because usually you would have received a complete and balanced budget, even if it was ugly, last week. We felt, given the amount of uncertainty and the need to continue working through this, that it was better to delay that just a bit and have a clearer picture. But what we would like to propose is that following tonight, we take this last set of proposals and build them into the draft of the budget with all the appendices and get that to the board early next week. Our budget workshop is the following week on March 25th. At that point, we will have another conversation about all of these proposals. We could very well have more information. We could have more resources. We could get, some kind of updates. But we would be willing to talk more with the board about what we have. We can share some of that data about the history of our use of fund balance over time. So that would be our meeting on the 25th. The following meeting is April 8th. That's the meeting at which we would ask the board to adopt the budget that would go before the voters. That's the meeting where we will distill everything down to a one-page worksheet where you will make some choices about what's in, what's out, how much fund balance, and so on. But ultimately, we need a balanced budget for that evening for the board to act on so that we can begin the process to get ready for our voters. I just want to do one more thing because we've had so much discussion around class sizes. So I just wanted to bring this slide up again. I shared it with everyone last week. But we have one section at Altamont that is one that we're watching, that grade 4. We're also looking at the kindergarten section. Right now, the class size in kindergarten at Altamont is 15.67. We only have 39 students enrolled at this point. If that were to hold, we would look at reducing that to 2 sections and moving that free section to some place where we have big numbers. So I will foreshadow that. So Altamont families, if you haven't registered your children, please do. I also want to point out Westmere and Linwood, but particularly Westmere. Westmere is we have the highest poverty in the Westmere catchment area. And there are 2 grades there that are near the top of the guideline. 3rd grade's at 24.25 and grade 5 is at 24. And then Linwood also has sections that are close to the top of the guideline. Grade 4 is 24.67, grade 5 is 24.33, and 2nd grade is almost at the top at 23. So we have to look across all of the sections and try to do our best for everyone and to use those unassigned wisely. We will be watching numbers literally every day. The elementary principals know we have a live spreadsheet where they change their numbers as students register, and we look at it daily. So we will be keeping close tabs on that. So I just wanted to point that out. And are there any more questions? Oh, go ahead.
So one of the emails that we received as a board from a parent specifically asked for a breakdown of staff and administrator positions to look for possible cuts from that sector to balance the budget. That was the only email we received that actually had an idea for a reduction, and I want to make sure that because of that we address this with a full and outlined response.
We can share the numbers and ratios of all staff. I don't have them prepared right now, but we can.
So we have 26 administrators. We're proposing to reduce 1, which is a 4+% reduction in our administrative team.
That particular email, I think, was not for public comment, but since Linda's not here, I just want to make sure we asked everyone if what they emailed us was for public comment or not. Do you know? We don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I think that's board ideas and sharing, I think, is probably the only thing left.
I think that's on the budget, or on the thing, but not
Actually,
that it's.
I don't
Go
know if
for
I have
it.
something positive to say, but
That would be wonderful.
it's not. I don't know if it's positive. Sorry. So 5 years ago today, the WHO declared COVID a pandemic.
Is this
So,
oh my gosh.
no, but
That's
this
right.
is, let's do glass half full, guys. Doesn't it seem like so long ago?
and then the
And think
13th
of how
is
much
when we
we've
should
accomplished.
Sunday,
and-
yeah. Half a decade,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
We led the way, didn't we?
glass half full.
Health Organization anymore?
I don't know if we did with the World Health Organization.
Marie, I think I saw the article recently of you talking about it while it happened. Because we were
We were the tip of the
Yes.
spear here in Guilderland. I will never forget. Eric Batchelder called me at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, Eric, why are you calling me at 4 o'clock in the morning? This can't be good. And he said, well, you have a positive case, and the Department of Health needs to speak with you. And that began Friday the 13th.
Yes. Because I texted you, is it true? And you went, yeah.
Sadly,
I'll text you back.
it was just for 2 weeks.
yes, followed by
Yeah,
2
2 weeks. Yes. I bet Mr. Obie $1 that the schools would close, and he said, absolutely not. That'll never happen. And there we are. And he still owes me $1, and he retired. Okay, so motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there more? For Q&A or?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Some of these, I think, are probably just something to think about. Some of them might be things that you can answer pretty quickly. So you're talking about class size. So if the class sizes at AES or others under review go over the guidelines during the year because students move in, do you look again at whether or not you would add another classroom, use one of the unassigned?
It's a great question. So when do we do the unassigned and add a section? We try to do it by early July because of the chaos it causes, because we've done it once when we add a section midway through.
I remember.
Especially for our youngest learners. We usually have a pretty good idea by the end of June if we're going to pass that guideline and run into trouble. So we try to do it before summer.
Okay. I know it's unlikely, but if we receive additional foundation aid after the Board of Ed adoption date, obviously you can't change the budget that is going to be voted on.
Right.
But what plans do you make for those funds?
It's a very good question. We by law cannot spend more than the budget is. The board adopts the budget. If the community votes on it, that is the amount we can spend and no more. So if we get additional aid, we may use it to offset other revenues that we would have used. It may end up in fund balance. It could happen a number of things, but we can't suddenly now go ahead and spend it. And, just to give context, because I've been doing this for so many years. All of the years when the budgets would be done at the state level in September, August, and school districts adopt their budget in April and they vote on it in May, huge surpluses were accrued in school districts because they would pass the budget and people planned so conservatively that they would get extra cash, which is why Andrew Cuomo was so intent on on-time budgets. But we like on-time budgets because we like to plan.
We also have the tax cap now.
And we have a tax cap now. How could I forget?
So one of my more theoretical questions is concerning TAs in first grade, and I wrote a letter to the board that I did not put for public comment, although you're welcome to read it if you ever want to out loud. That I submitted that last week.
Yeah.
That's okay. But
You want to read it?
we know that it will eliminate the ability to work in small groups, which poses disadvantages to our young learners who need that help. How will the district support our first grade teachers with this significant change in their classrooms? Will the curriculum change, especially considering our class sizes? What will we do to support our first grade teachers? Like I said, it's kind of theoretical. The only other thing I'm concerned about is I fully support the idea of the GES and WES classrooms that are not CSP and not Gen Ed. The first year working here, I worked in a skills class, and I know that's not exactly what you're looking at either, but it was a really good place for so many students that I worked with. How do we hire for that if we're having so much trouble hiring someone for special ed? So that's my only concern there.
Those are excellent questions, Chris, and not quickly answered.
Right.
But
Okay.
we understand the challenges in both. Thank you for sharing them.
Thank you for listening.
I think I saw a hand. No? Anyone else? Go ahead. Could you come up to the mic? Thanks.
This was more to get some clarification on the, way back you showed a slide about the technology. I think it was 200-something thousand for Chromebooks and things like that. Is there any way to allocate that money for classroom sections or things like that? I mean, I know personally, and I know a lot of parents at Altamont don't like our kids on the Chromebooks, and I would rather my kid not be on a Chromebook, but have a class that's smaller and not have any access to the Chromebook, but have a class of 17.
So a lot of that's a bigger policy question. Right now, if we have, or since we have established Chromebooks for students in certain grades, those have to be replaced. And so this is about purchasing Chromebooks for students who are in the grades where they would get new Chromebooks. And that's what this is driven by. If there's a larger consideration about eliminating technology, that's a more deep conversation. But
Right.
that's what it's difficult to put off the purchase of Chromebooks because we need new Chromebooks for students entering the grades that get them, because if they get the ones that are 4 years old, not only are they aged and slow, but they're often not supported anymore, and we have technology and privacy concerns that our IT director back there often shares with us, that we need to replace these machines. We can't cycle them through this grade. So that's what
Okay.
drives a lot of this.
Okay, thanks.
So we can't reallocate is the ultimate question. And they're purchased as part of an installment purchase agreement that's multi-year. So we're committed to it, and it's for 4th, 5th, and 9th grade, I believe.
Right.
So, yes, I get it. If we can find another way.
Board ideas, sharing? Okay, motion to adjourn, Kelly. Second, Meredith? Okay.
All those in favor?
All those in favor. Gloria, are you in favor? Everybody's in favor. Okay.